All right, let's talk about inventory accounting. Now, I know what you might be thinking, counting boxes on a shelf, right? But it's so much more than that. It's actually about making these key choices that can completely change how a company's finances look to the outside world. So, let me kick things off with a little puzzle for you. Picture this. You've got two hardware stores right next to each other. They're identical in every single way. They buy the exact same hammers from the exact same supplier for the exact same price, and they sell them to the same people. But when the end of the year rolls around, one of them reports a way higher profit than the other. I mean, how on earth is that even possible?
Well, the secret, it's all in how they account for that stuff, just sitting on the shelves waiting to be sold. It really boils down to the assumptions they make when they put a dollar value on those hammers. And trust me, this is where inventory accounting goes from kind of boring to absolutely fascinating.
Okay, so before we even get into the numbers, the dollars and cents, we've got to tackle a much more basic question. What stuff do we actually own? I know, it sounds super obvious, right? But as you're about to see, it can get surprisingly complicated.
So, first things first, the cost of an item, it's not just the price on the invoice. Nope, the true cost includes literally every penny it takes to get that item onto the shelf and ready to sell. We're talking the purchase price, of course, but also things like import duties, shipping costs, even insurance while it's on the truck. All of that gets bundled up, or baked in, to the final value of that inventory.
But what about the stuff that's not even in your warehouse yet? You know, the inventory that's on a truck or a container ship somewhere in the middle of the ocean. Who owns that? Well, it all comes down to these little acronyms in the shipping contract. If it says FOB shipping point, the buyer owns it the second it leaves the seller's dock. But if it says FOB destination, the seller is on the hook until it actually shows up at the buyer's doorstep. And here's the crazy part. This means a company can literally own thousands, maybe millions of dollars of inventory that they haven't even laid eyes on yet.
And just to make things a little more interesting, let's throw in another wrinkle: consignment goods. Think about it. You walk into a little boutique and see a beautiful painting from a local artist. Chances are the shop doesn't actually own that painting. The artist, who we call the consignor, still does. So that artist has to count that painting as part of their inventory, even though it's physically hanging on a wall in someone else's store. Wild, right?
All right, so we've figured out what to count. Now the next big decision is when to count it, or how often to count it. And this leads us to two totally different ways of keeping track of everything.
So you've got two main flavors here. First up is the perpetual system. Think of a car dealership. The second a car drives off the lot, their inventory system is updated in real time. It's constant, it's complex, and is pretty much essential when you're dealing with high-value items like cars. Then you have the complete opposite, the periodic system. This is more for, say, a hardware store selling nuts and bolts. Instead of tracking every single screw that gets sold, they just do a big count at the end of the month or the quarter to figure out what's left. It's way simpler, but the downside is you're kind of flying blind between counts.
But here's the thing, and this is a big one. It doesn't matter how slick your computer system is, whether it's perpetual, periodic, run by an AI, whatever. Every single company has to do a full physical count at least once a year. You know, people with clipboards actually counting the boxes. They have to make sure the number in the computer matches the reality on the shelf. There's just no escaping it.
And now we get to the main event. This is it. This is the single decision that solves the puzzle of our two hardware stores. It's the big question. When the prices you pay for your inventory are constantly changing, which cost do you use when you finally sell an item?
Let's just break it down. Imagine you're a hardware store owner. In January, you buy a hammer for $10. Then in February, a little inflation kicks in and you have to buy the exact same hammer for $12. Okay, now it's March. You sell one of those hammers. So which one did you sell? The $10 one from January or the $12 one from February? Because your answer is going to have a huge impact on your profit.
Okay, so the first way to answer that question is called FIFO. It stands for first in, first out, and it's exactly what it sounds like. You assume that the first things you bought are the first things you sell. The classic example is a grocery store, right? They're always pushing the older cartons of milk to the front of the shelf so they sell first. It's super logical, and a lot of the time, it's how stuff actually moves in the real world.
So if we use FIFO for our hammer problem, when you sell that hammer, you record that you sold the first one you bought, the $10 one. So what does that leave on your shelf?
the $12 hammer you bought more recently. And this is the key takeaway for FIFO. The inventory that's left over, your ending inventory, is valued at the most recent, most current prices.
All right, now let's look at the other side of the coin, LIFO, last in, first out. And yeah, you guessed it, this assumes a complete opposite. Here, we pretend the newest items are the first ones to go out the door. The perfect picture for this is a big pile of sand or gravel at a landscaping company. When a truck comes to pick some up, they just scoop it off the top of the pile, the stuff that was delivered last. Meanwhile, the old stuff from months ago is just sitting there buried at the bottom.
So going back to our hammer, if we use LIFO, when we sell one, we assume we sold the last one we bought, the more expensive $12 one. And that leaves the older, cheaper $10 hammer sitting on our shelf. You see the difference? With LIFO, your ending inventory is valued at these old, sometimes ancient prices. It is the polar opposite of FIFO. And this is where it all comes together. Just look at the impact of that one choice, especially when prices are going up, during inflation. With FIFO, since you're selling the older, cheaper stuff, your cost of goods sold is lower. Lower costs mean, you guessed it, higher profits. LIFO does the exact opposite. You're selling the new, more expensive stuff, so your costs are higher, and that means your reported profit is lower.
Okay, so you're probably asking, why in the world would any company choose to report lower profits? Well, the answer is pretty simple. It comes down to one word: taxes. See, a lower profit means you pay a lower tax bill. So while FIFO might look better on paper to investors because the profits are higher, LIFO can be a really smart tax strategy, especially when inflation is high.
Okay, so we know what to count, when to count it, and how to put a price on it. But this is the real world, and in the real world, things get messy. Things go wrong.
Check this out. An inventory error isn't just a one-time thing, it has this crazy ripple effect. Let's say you mess up and count too much inventory at the end of year one. Okay, that makes your profit for year one look artificially great. But the error doesn't just vanish. It automatically flips around and bites you in year two. That high ending number from year one becomes your high starting number for year two, which then makes year two's profit look artificially low. So one little mistake ends up distorting your books for 2 whole years.
And for our final dose of reality, stuff loses value. It just does. What happens when you're a tech store and you've got a back room full of last year's smartphone? Or you're a grocery store with a bunch of apples that are starting to get bruised? You can't just keep them on your books for the price you paid, right? That wouldn't be honest.
And of course, accounting has a rule for that. It's basically a reality check rule. It says you have to value your inventory at either its original cost or what it's worth on the market today, whichever one is lower. So if those old phones are now basically worthless, you have to write down their value on your books to reflect that. The bottom line is, companies are not allowed to walk around pretending their inventory is worth more than it really is.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, you realize all these little choices, what to count, how to track it, FIFO or LIFO, it's not just boring bookkeeping, it's storytelling. These are all deliberate decisions that a company makes to craft the financial story it tells the world.
So here's my challenge to you. The next time you're looking at a company's financial statements, don't just skip past the inventory line. Dive into the footnotes. Find out if they're using FIFO or LIFO. And then ask yourself, what story is that choice telling me? Because once you understand this language, you can start to see the real story that's hidden behind the numbers.